Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. As always, this is your captain, Randy Wright speaking, and I'd like to take this opportunity to personally thank you for choosing to fly the friendly airwaves with us here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. Well, one of the most popular online streamers and podcasters today is Tim Pool, a man who is admittedly of the liberal persuasion, at least in the past. He considers himself now a left-leaning libertarian, left-leaning on certain issues, more conservative on other issues, and, what he would call a disenfranchised liberal. And there are quite a few of those, particularly now that the Democratic Party has apparently gone ever further off the deep end, as is clearly evidenced by the sort of behavior that was exhibited on the anniversary of the January 6th lark, or LARPing, for want of a better term. They were basically going around and, rambling. They were rambling through the United States Capitol building. The most criminal thing they did was arguably criminal trespass. And yet, the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists have just gone off the deep end. They've fallen off their rockers. They're doing everything within their power in an attempt to twist this narrative into being something different. But anyway, to his credit, Tim Pool has called this nonsense out. He's pointed it out. And yes, there's a lot on which Tim and I would disagree. He supports socialized, so-called universal health care. I am adamantly opposed to that. I do not believe that it is possible for such a system to work, and that I believe that it would be an unmitigated disaster if it was ever attempted here in the United States. But Tim Pool emphatically disagrees with that. However, he does sit there and say that he can't think of a way that it could morally be implemented. And, I guess that's kudos to him, and that we could give him a certain amount of credit with respect to that. But anyway, in this line of work, it is very easy for us to make enemies. And given the political climate and atmosphere of modern America, and the way that people wear their feelings and emotions on their sleeves, it is so easy for a toxic miasma, for want of a better term, to begin to flow through all of the dark crevices of society, poisoning us. Vicious, toxic people will go out of their way to attempt to ruin somebody that they disagree with because they can't handle the thought that somebody doesn't believe everything that they do, and that they are not ready, willing, and able to drop everything to march in lockstep with their Pavlovian, socialistic, bovine excrement type of mindset. The fragile Twinkie snowflakes, for want of a better term, that will go forth and castigate people and attempt to besmirch them and assassinate their character and belittle them at every available and given opportunity. We see it day in and day out, but it's particularly prevalent on the left, to the point that cancel culture is the perfect embodiment of this sort of system that they've built, that this sort of thing that they are pushing is a desirable goal, and the type of new society that they are modeling, or perhaps rather more appropriately, the New World Order type mentality. These people look at those who have managed to muster a bit of success, such as Tim Pool, and they begin to get angry, particularly when they discover that Tim Pool now considers himself to be divorced from the left, to be dissatisfied and disenchanted with the left, and they want to punish him. They want to punish him for going off the reservation. And this is really kind of the dangerous thing about the left. And not just the left, but any type of hyper tribalistic politics. It's that it's religious. It really is borderline religious, and anyone who goes off the reservation will be treated as an apostate, a persona non grata that must be punished. And so how do they do this? Well, it all depends. They'll either attempt to get you canceled by inventing things or twisting words that you said, taking things out of context in order to get you fired or to get you in a particularly tight spot, so that you are unable to carve out a living for yourself, and so that you are ostracized and essentially chased out of polite society. That's one thing they do. The other thing they do is they'll make false reports, they'll make false copyright claims, anything to essentially deplatform you, because they want it to be that as you do not agree with them, or you do not hold their beliefs to 100% the same degree that they do, that you shouldn't exist. And that means that your online presence, your banking presence, anything, they'll attempt to destroy you. And to show you just the links that they are willing to go to, you have to consider with Tim Pool that they swatted him. Now, for those of you who are unaware, swatting is where someone calls the local police force after they have discovered the address of the intended target and victim, and they make a false claim. Tonight, Tim Pool was hosting a former police officer, unironically, or rather ironically in this case, the officer Tatum, who absolutely has a great YouTube channel. I would suggest checking that out. Both he and Tim Pool, really, they are consummate professionals when it comes to their line of work. But anyway, the call that was made by some sort of agitated snowflake, somebody who has a personal vendetta against Tim Pool for some sort of perceived wrong, whether it be real or not, and I'm going to err on the side of it not being real. They called and reported that there had been a double homicide committed at Tim's, I want to call it a compound. It's a huge mansion that's secluded out in the woods where very few people know where it is, and he's relatively secretive about it. It's out in West Virginia, which is already a fairly rustic state. And that the person that had committed the double homicide was supposedly preparing to hurt others and was going to self-delete. Well, that sort of a situation, when phoned into the police, creates extenuating circumstances. The police are put into a very dangerous situation because the various units will be deployed, because it is considered to be an armed and dangerous situation that is a clear and present danger to the lives of others and to the lives of the alleged perpetrator or killer. And so multiple SWAT vehicles and various other police units were deployed to Tim Pool's address. Unfortunately for him, his security team caught this, and he had employees out on the grounds of the estate who basically put their hands up in the air and approached the police and explained the situation, but the police still went into the compound. Now, Tim Pool's argument was that he had mats around the place that said you couldn't enter without a warrant, but the police explained that they had to check it, that there were extenuating circumstances, and that when there are extenuating circumstances, then they are allowed to search the premises. And yes, in certain circumstances, that's right. All an officer needs to engage in that type of a sweep is a probable cause belief that there is a clear and present danger, or that there is the risk of there being imminent threats to death or bodily harm, and that's what the call said. Now, what should happen in this type of instance is, now that it has been found that it was not a correct report, that this was an attempt to swat, then the lugs of the collar need to be pulled. We need to find a way to backtrack it and seek to pursue charges to the fullest extent of the law against the one who made this false police report and allegation, this false call. Now, it is interesting, I don't have this radio clip, but I was watching on Nick Rekieta's channel, where he went, was provided by one of his viewers from Twitter, the radio chatter of the police force, where they explained that they had been called to the estate, that there was a political film being made, and that they didn't need to deploy the SWAT into it. Now, this came after, based off of the footage that Tim Pool showed from his security camera, there had been discussions with security personnel on the ground. And so it would be after the fact of the initial call and the initial deployment of the police. So there really isn't any grounds as to where you can blame the officers. Their mind, there were extenuating circumstances that gave them probable cause to believe that there was an imminent danger of death or severe bodily harm. And you don't want it to be that there is not at least some leeway with law enforcement, because just think of how bad it would be if law enforcement was able to just sit there and say, look, there's no recourse here. We owe no duty to society, where there's a simple mat out there saying do not enter. It's the same type of mentality, and dangerous sort of mentality, that a gun-free zone would create. Oh, well, because we've put out this sign, obviously the criminals will follow that. No, you can't do that. It's a delicate balance. It's a delicate balance, and it's difficult for law enforcement officers and personnel to know exactly what to do in this sort of circumstance. So I understand Pool being upset. And again, what this really needs, or puts emphasis on, is that we have to know our rights. By knowing our rights, we know what we can do. And that's why I think it is of the utmost importance that everyone have a copy of the Constitution and read it. Learn what your rights are, and also learn what limitations the police have. That way you can respectfully but ably defend your rights. It's a tough situation. I'm glad that no one was hurt. This really did have the potential of being a lot worse than it wound up being, and they were fortunate. And I certainly hope the one that phoned in this false report gets his or her comeuppance. Ladies and gentlemen, we have got to address these problems that are lingering within the inner sanctums of the land of the free and the home of the brave. We are approaching a type of chaos and anarchy, the likes of which will tear this nation asunder. We can't afford to allow that to happen. And I think it is time that we point to these examples and say, look, this just isn't going to work. This isn't going to cut it. This isn't the legacy or way of life, standard of living that we want in the United States, and that we are ready, willing, and able to do whatever is necessary to ensure that our country remains a free and open one. Ladies and gentlemen, keep your eyes open and be situationally aware, because this type of thing, I'm afraid, is going to become all the more common. Despite that, I think we can overcome these hurdles, obstacles, and adversities and find a way back to sanity, and do it through the Constitution. Thank you for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen. I hope to see you next time. Please do take care. Catch ya later.